Hey, can you guys hear me?
Hey, Rafa. Yeah, it's Dave. Dave Fortson from the Regen team. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome, cool. Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited.
Yes, stoked to have you here. Welcome, Gregory. Welcome, Johnny.
Hello, hello. Good to see you. Hey, Rafa. Hey, Johnny. Good to hear you, Dave.
Likewise. Good morning. I think Johnny's just connecting in. Looks like Johnny is connected. Welcome, Johnny. Nice to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Cool.
All right, Gregory, this is your show today. You want to take it away?
Yeah, I'm so excited. Well, I think the idea today is to just kind of review this amazing multi-protocol product launch using a bridge and IBC and 3 different blockchains to run some experiments with carbon liquidity, fuel the carbon zero campaign in the Cosmos corner of the crypto universe, and just sort of talk about what we just pulled off between Toucan and Osmosis and Regen Network, and what might be coming next. So I'm thinking we just get to do a little bit of a retro on what it's been like to make this happen, where things are currently at, some of the liquidity stats and retirement stats, and we can talk a little bit about how the bridge and the tech is working, and also spend a good amount of time looking forward to what may be coming down the line. And I think some of that can be concrete, and we can also speculate a little bit about just what this kind of these kinds of tools are going to be enabling in the markets. So that's my idea. And Rafa and Johnny, if you guys have other ideas and sort of topics that you want to throw into the mix, by all means. Maybe let's just get started. And I think I'm going to tweet out that we're here. I'd encourage Rafa, you and Johnny to also do that. And we always get it's always a little, like about 10 minutes in, calls sort of start to fill up. But in the meantime, I'd love it if each of you just kind of gave a quick introduction. Now that we kind of have the run of play idea, each of you just give an introduction to yourself, and Rafa, you give an introduction to Toucan, and Johnny to about Osmosis, and then we can kind of dig in from there.
Okay, I'll break the awkward silence. Thanks, Gregory, for setting the stage. My name is Raphaël. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO at Toucan. Toucan is an infrastructure protocol that is all about moving carbon credits on chain and really scaling the carbon market. So we believe that Web3 is the rails on which the future carbon market need to be built if we want to reach the goals of solving climate change in the time that we have left. And I said it, I think I'm personally super excited about this bridge, not only from like a technical point of view, because I think it's quite the brilliant piece of engineering, but Gregory knows this. I've been a big fan of Regen Network from the beginning, and have been listening to all the podcasts, and so Regen Network had a big influence on me in my journey with Toucan. And so yeah, I'm just excited to be able to contribute and see Toucan and Regen working closer together, and excited, Johnny, to get your take on things, and this is a pretty beautiful collaboration between these 3 projects. So I'll pass it over to you.
Okay. I'm Johnny. I am the governance facilitator for Osmosis Labs towards the Osmosis chain. Osmosis is a DeFi blockchain that is host to a large decentralized exchange that's IBC connected. So lots of different chains. If you've not come across IBC before, it's a completely different structure to something like Ethereum or Polygon. I Yeah, I'm really excited about this, to be honest, because I've been with Osmosis for about a year now, and this originally was passed before I was actually working for the team. This was something that I'd kind of pursued as a something that I wanted to do as a community member before I was, yeah, working with the Osmosis team. So it's really pleased to see it come together. And as as Raphael says, um, we although it's available now for something like Cosmos Zero, um, it's kind of what's going to happen next with this being available as a kind of building block of regenerative finance. That's correct.
Hey, sorry, I think I had a little Twitter glitch there. So, yeah, thank you both. And can you hear me? Just sound checking. I
Yeah,
think. Okay, great,
yeah, we can.
great,
If
great.
Gregory, quick question: if you have a Twitter glitch, is that a Twitch? Is that what Twitch is supposed to do?
Yeah, exactly. Twitch the Twitter glitch. So I kind of want rewinding and going back in time, like you said, Johnny. This product launch that just happened, this sort of multi-team bridged uh, carbon liquidity to serve offsetting in the Cosmos ecosystem, has been an idea and something that's been worked on for more than a year now. And I think one of the things that was always most exciting and that made it take so long in a lot of ways is, one, this involves three different communities, three different protocols, and at least in the case of, I think Toucan is maybe still pre-public community governance, but both Regen and Osmosis are in a phase where, basically every step of this launch has gone through a community governance process. Johnny, do you want to talk a little bit about the Osmosis community governance process and sort of like the community owned liquidity, Osmosis as a protocol owning and providing liquidity, and just some of the concepts and roots of that set up the bridge and liquidity pool that just launched for us?
Yeah, so like Regen, Osmosis is a proof of stake blockchain that's stakers stake their token in order to secure the chain. As a kind of interface with the kind of consensus, what can happen is that you can actually vote with those tokens on text proposals and parameter changes directly. So a non-technical person can put proposals up and vote on them to set the direction of the blockchain. So yes, yeah, so pretty much anyone can put a governance proposal up as long as they put some tokens up as a deposit, and then everyone that has token staked that can then vote on that. So in this case, I think we put it up for discussion for a few weeks, and it was around a year ago. So you have to bear with me. I don't quite remember the details now. But yeah, we kind of had feedback on how much liquidity that we'd want to have, and how we wanted to carry this out. Now, another quirk of Cosmos blockchains is that they have something called a community pool, which is a set of tokens that accumulate to an address and that can only be spent by by the stakers voting to spend them. So in this case, what had happened is the Osmosis community voted to spend some tokens to purchase NCT, which would then be paired with other tokens to provide a representative token of that liquidity. And then that token that represents that liquidity returns back to the community pool of the Osmosis protocol. So what will happen now is that we basically got protocol on liquidity of NCT in Osmosis, and that isn't going anywhere because it could be voted to be removed, but it's likely going to stay there pretty much forever, and just continue to get swap fees for the protocol and act as a source of NCT from those swap fees to come, which is basically our plan to harvest those swap fees over time to make ourselves perpetually carbon neutral.
Right, exactly. So the concept here that which I really love is the Osmosis community sort of pre-purchasing a bunch of carbon and hosting it so that other protocols can access that liquidity to offset themselves through the Carbon Zero program, which I'll talk a little bit about. And by providing that service, the Osmosis community can generate fees and then use those fees to continue offsetting itself in perpetuity. So it's just a really cool, I think it's really elegant. And so Osmosis doing protocol owned liquidity, the Regen community providing some liquidity, and then independent providers engaging in liquidity to just sort of set up a carbon pool. So that's been the concept. It's really exciting. So I kind of want to just for a second shift back over to you, Rafa, and give us a little bit more of an overview of, because Toucan is operating on Polygon, operating on Celo, now Regen and NCT's on Osmosis. So you guys are really operating as kind of a multi-chain carbon, liquidity bridge and provider. Do you want to just give us a little bit of an overview of that world and what's happening? Like, where's NCT live besides in Osmosis and Regen's corner of the universe, and just what's happening in Toucan right now?
Sure. So yeah, we're officially a multi-chain protocol now, which has been a difficult lift, like from as I said, from like an engineering point of view. But the reason that I believe that we need to do that is because ultimately we all it's not enough to just have carbon, like a carbon chain, in my opinion, to have like, okay, one chain that is like the carbon chain, because ultimately if we want to integrate regenerative practices deeper into the code, deeper into the protocols that run like on every blockchain, we need to have access to this kind of core building block on every blockchain, right? So the way that I look at NCT, it's really a building block, like a carbon money Lego, if you want. And it's probably one of the easiest ways to date to encode offsetting, for instance, into code, into your own protocol, into to hold it as a treasury asset, etc. So my personal belief is that is that DeFi is for DeFi to really become like the backbone of the future financial system. I believe that DeFi needs to solve for a few problems that the existing financial system could not solve for. And I think the fact that our extractive financial system today has not managed to actually transform itself and be more regenerative, I think this is ultimately an opportunity for the Web3 community to build a better system that by design is regenerative. And so, so it just makes a lot of sense for NCT to be on a DeFi chain like Osmosis. NCT can also be found on Polygon, as you said. We're also live on Celo. So we have essentially two different bridge protocols right now that we're using. So we're using Hyperlane on the Polygon Celo side to connect those two chains, and then with the Regen team, there's been like a kind of a self-developed bridge protocol between Regen and Polygon. So that's kind of the current state of like NCT on chain. I'll take a quick second. Like, what is NCT? So NCT essentially is a pool token from Toucan's Carbon Pool. So carbon pools essentially are similar to the basket module on Regen, where anyone can deposit a TCO2, which is a TCO2 is kind of like an eco credit. So it's like a uniquely identified carbon credit that comes with like all sorts of attributes and data attached to it. And so anyone can deposit a TCO2 into a pool if it matches the criteria that is set forth by the pool. In the case of NCT, this criteria is that the carbon credit needs to be nature-based and vintage 2012 or newer. And right now, the only credits that are available are from the Verra carbon standard. So essentially, NCT was kind of a next iteration from in the direction of getting more differentiated and getting like having essentially building up liquidity around more differentiated type of carbon assets. So that's the
related to vis-a-vis the basic carbon ton that's Toucan, the first sort of carbon pool, right?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
that's the differentiation between that and
exactly.
the base carbon ton. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first pool that's been launched in Toucan was launched by KlimaDAO and was a base carbon ton, which essentially was really like a kind of catch-it-all type of pool with the goal of creating like a floor price for carbon credits, and it had a challenge where that like within that pool there were some nature-based carbon credits, but because a pool acts a bit like a commodity, or not just a bit like a commodity, it acts exactly like a commodity. A lot of these credits were not accurately priced. So we switched, like essentially we spun up this NCT pool. We worked together with Regen, Moss, the BitCo WG group to define the criteria around NCT, and then basically all came together, bootstrapped some of the liquidity, and so yeah, as you said, Gregory, that's been in the making for a long time, and now after the support that Regen gave Toucan to really help bootstrap NCT over in Polygon, now we finally have the bridge over to Regen and can connect us two ecosystems now.
Awesome, thank you. So now, kind of a spicy topic. There's been a lot of news, essentially, kind of like pointing out some of the flaws of some of the credits and crediting approaches that are included in the NCT approach. And I'm curious, I tend to think that the way to address that is to create essentially focus our energy on creating new, better carbon assets and creating new, more differentiated pools and baskets that can allow the differentiation and sort of like push the market towards higher quality, while kind of applauding the first generation of assets for what they are, is sort of an incremental but flawed step in the right direction. I'm curious, is that your take as well, Rafa? And and what are your thoughts about sort of higher quality pools and the relationship between different pools or baskets?
Yeah. So look, I'm fully with you. I think there's a lot of learnings from that we can take, or like, I think not just Toucan, but also as a community, of like on like from these last 1.5 years. So I do think that there were a lot of mistakes that have been made in like the type of assets that have been bridged on chain in the first place. And so I think it's don't necessarily need to go back exactly as to like why, etc. I think this topic has been discussed extensively. I've also written a blog post a few weeks ago, kind of outlining a bit of the history of Toucan. So anybody who's interested can kind of go back there. But so I'm with you that the reality is that we cannot fully rely on carbon standards to provide us with like a minimum threshold kind of quality, right? And I think especially in the last year, again, especially Rep Plus projects have taken a big hit because more and more data has been became public, that a lot of the projects that are certified under the Rep Plus standard or like under the Rep Plus methodology overestimate the amount of carbon credits that have been issued by a given project. Now, I think there's two ways to go about this. So the first one is, again, if we understand that a carbon credit essentially is supposed to represent 1 ton of carbon that has been reduced or removed from the atmosphere, I think it's fair to say that we cannot guarantee, and this is not, it's not, this is just me as like an infrastructure, like Toucan, speaking as an infrastructure provider, we cannot guarantee that a carbon credit right now, that every carbon credit in NCT actually has contributed to the reduction of 1 ton of carbon emissions. So I think that's just that's pretty clear to date, given the reports that have come out, etc. So, quite frankly, does it mean that every token in NCT is worthless? No. Does it mean you maybe want to offset a bit more? Yes, probably, right? So this is the way that I'm looking at it. Is this is far from perfect, but I think it's a good start, and it still has the utility of any carbon credit, just maybe not 100% of it. And unfortunately, this is if you look at rating projects like B0, etc., I think only 7% of all the credits that they have rated got this high likelihood of being a full ton of carbon has been removed or reduced. So I think this is just a general advice when you deal with carbon credits, that unfortunately we're dealing with very intricate, very difficult science, right? Because we're dealing with projects on the ground. The data is really hard to get. There's corruption. There's it's not always easy to know what is true and what is not. And so I think that being cautious a bit when you look at environmental assets from that sense, or from that lens, is always welcome.
So I want to bat this over to Johnny in a second, but just riffing on this for a second. All right, so NCT, I'm not sure what is trading at right now, somewhere around $2.
180, I think. Yeah.
180, yeah. So I'm kind of okay. And the social and ecological cost of carbon is estimated by various different groups to be $100, $120, $150, something like that per ton. I'm curious, to what degree does the market already provide the accurate discount in the price? And to what degree should we just be setting up our offsetting? Should we just say, hey, we're going to spend $150. We're going to get our offset estimates. We're going to spend $150, and either we'll, and we'll do a mix, a portfolio mix, where we'll buy a spread at different prices and maybe reinvest a little bit in innovation or something. I mean, does that hold water to you, Rafa? And kind of just curious, what's your personal offsetting approach? For your family, yeah. Do you just overbuy and retire at 10x, or what? How do you deal with that uncertainty, knowing what you know?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I personally don't think that offsetting itself is the most interesting use case anyways. And I know that this might sound weird, because what carbon credits are most used as today is essentially some polluter measuring, calculating the amount of emissions, so the amount of negative externalities that they produce, and then buying carbon offsets to match that and call themselves carbon neutral. I don't think this is the most, I don't think this is good enough. This is not good enough because at the stage that we're at right now, it's not if everybody is now carbon neutral, we're still not in a good place. We still need to remove more than we actually currently have. So we already have too much carbon in the atmosphere. That's what I'm trying to say. So I think in any situation, I think it's much more interesting to think about, as you said, is the amount of money that you direct towards removing or reducing your emissions. Because the reality is that not every business has the same carbon intensity. So let's say, and this is true for most of the tech, like tech in most of the tech, like the protocols, the even the companies, they don't really have high emissions. Not if you compare it to like industry, like you know, cement or aluminium or whatever you want. So I think we need to kind of switch in our like how we look at um, the kind of this whole the responsibility, the corporate social responsibility. I think it's much more interesting to think in terms of like actual contribution, so money spent on climate action, right? And then we're getting closer to like a taxation or like a voluntary carbon tax, where you're like, okay, like I'm saying like 1% of our revenue goes towards that, right? And then I'm with you is like, okay, how do you spend this 1%, right? And I think taking a portfolio approach is really good. Is to say, okay, like I'll take some of that money and put it into like I'll call them like the moonshot projects, right? So this might be like really advanced like ecosystem restoration on the ground with local communities that like are like very small projects that might be still at the beginning and might need their financing, which is to get them off the ground. This might be like CDR, like tech-based carbon removal projects that are like closer to $1,000 a ton right now because they're so early in their like scaling path. And so I think distributing the money that you spent on environmental impact across the board, I think is right now the kind of most I'd say the safest and probably also the most impactful approach. So look, you asked me to just finish. You asked me about my individual footprint. Like my individual footprint is so small that I can easily do like a 10x of that with NCT. I have personally worked with like carbon removal companies just because I'm curious and like so I think it's just for me it's more of like a playing around, but I think that the impact that we can have is like as organizations obviously is much bigger than the impact that we have personally. That is for like when I mean like looking at carbon credits, right? I think the impact that we can have on decarbonization, like thinking about okay, so how do we behave, what do we buy, how do we eat, etc. I think the impact there obviously is much bigger than the decision of like okay, which offset am I going to buy, right? So that's how I'm thinking about it
at an individual level. Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool. Thanks, Raphaël. So Johnny, how sort of similar question but oriented, and you can think about this from a personal perspective, but also maybe your sense at a protocol level. How are we thinking? Is this something? I guess the question would be for you is to what degree is this sort of like something that Regen Network should be thinking about and giving guidance, or is this something that should be a debate and a conversation and opinions expressed, for instance, of the Osmosis community or other protocols or projects or businesses that are offsetting themselves?
I just wanted to say I pretty much agree with the approach of considering it as a mentality of this is what you're going to be spending money on as a proportion of your kind of yearly spend. I know we had the same issue in Osmosis, trying to work out what the actual offset would be required to be. So on the one hand, we don't know how good the quality of the tokens are, because again, this is quite a new field, but also we had difficulty finding what the actual carbon offset required was, because we've got a lot of validators. They all run on different types of machines. They all use different power sources. Unless you ask every single one, you can only make an estimate. So that was quite varied as well. So the way that we've ended up approaching it is saying that we'll take the worst case scenario for our usage and just say we're going to basically make a conscious effort towards allocating some funds. Whatever we get from the carbon market likely will be what is retired in the future. Yeah, obviously I can't guarantee that because it's entirely up to government in the future to decide what to do. But that's the way that it would make sense for me to do, and that's the way that I'd be pushing for in the future.
Right. So this is an interesting case in which, and I think you see this happening across the business world, in which businesses, or in this case, community governed protocol, if you're an early adopter and you make a quick commitment and you allocate a chunk of capital, you may actually end up sort of having an economic benefit from the process, because you are providing offsetting services essentially by having that liquidity over time, so you can sort of auto offset and maybe even have an economic gain. I guess the question is, are you strict about reallocating all of that economic gain to actually doing things that may improve accuracy, precision, and quality for the larger market? You don't need to answer that. That's just sort of like a philosophical question I have. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think as I was just going to say, as I think the market will decide if there are different tokens available. But at the moment, NCT is the only token that we have available to us. So I think that more than likely we're going to be trusting in Regen Network to and Toucan to kind of work out how best to kind of optimize that existing asset.
Right. Well, I think then there's a bigger question there around, again, this sort of like circles back to, and I mean, I just want to say, I don't feel competent or capable as an individual to make a decision like this. Do we create new baskets and pools that represent new generations, or do we upgrade the existing baskets and pools? I've been thinking a lot about mechanisms to clean out the vintages, like older vintages and vintages of NCT that are shown to underperform from their claims. I've also been thinking about how do we make these credits more dynamic so that there's sort of like a pay it forward. I've been thinking about, can these carbon offsets, like when you buy one and retire it, could we match it with a next generation credit so that you're sort of like, there's all of these different ways that I think we could radically improve the user experience and the kind of like impact reality. I think there's also another theory of change, which is just like, beat the hell out of the existing market participants for it not being perfect. But, there's so many interesting opportunities to innovate that gives me a lot of hope, and especially this is what's exciting, because Toucan and Osmosis and Regen are all pretty innovative communities. I see that there's all of this space. Could we be airdropping, if somebody's been doing offsetting for a little while, could we airdrop them sort of like a free year offset subscription with higher quality, carbon, for instance? How would we, there's a question of like, how do you finance that and how do you sort of like make that happen? But that's the type of thing where my brain is leaping, like how do we really reward the people, the protocols, and individuals who are sort of like taking the risk and leaning in and saying like, yes, like this is an important activity and use to place a positive value on regeneration activities, to internalize the cost of carbon emissions into businesses in a proactive way so that we can reorient our economy. These are really important activities. So those who are like leaning in, how do we kind of create a virtuous cycle of reward? And that's something that's so I think DeFi and token mechanics, there's all these rich experiments that are like that, where you're trying to create a virtuous flywheel and incentives for adoption and engagement. So I just can't help think there's a lot of fun opportunities there in kind of the open protocol ecosystem for that kind of reward and incentive. Meanwhile, we have all this work to do, the real, rolling your sleeves up and getting in there, which we're 6 years into at Regen, and I think just about to create the third generation of sort of tokenized carbon credits. Like the first NCT is the first generation, and it took us a while to build interoperability and liquidity and sort of and utility around that first generation. The second generation, I think, are these two-way bridges with more independent registries like we have with city forest credits, where there's these really cool, high quality, place-based in the United States offsets, and there's a two-way bridge agreement with the registry. And then the third generation, I think, are these sort of fully blockchain native, community governed standards, which the first generation of those is coming into Regen, in the next month. There's going to be several credits moving into the marketplace, which is very exciting. You have all the metadata, all the governance. It's sort of gone through a fully transparent on-chain process and only exists as an on-chain. So, the market relationship between those three generations, there's a price difference. The price for NCT is a little under $2. The price for city forest credits is $30 to $40, and I don't know what the price is yet of this sort of third generation. Anyway, I tend to think that we can't get along just on the price reflection, that there needs to be these other mechanisms and balancing. But it's just such a fascinating field, I guess. No direct questions, but would welcome observations. Johnny, what's
Oh, go on, Raphael. I interrupted you last time.
I appreciate it. No, Greg, I just wanted to. I think this is an extremely interesting idea. You should also think of how this liquidity that is now available can help bootstrap these smaller or maybe less liquid new assets that are coming on chain. And this is also why I'm excited about this connection between Toucan and Regen, is because this goes both ways. I'm excited to also give the rest of the world, the rest of the on-chain world, access to those new credits that are coming on chain, Web3 native carbon credits. And I think maybe thinking about, okay, as you said, if we all agree that we should think of things of buying behavior more in terms of a bundle or a portfolio approach, there might be a pretty easy way to create such a portfolio that directly, matches NCT with maybe these city credits or maybe others that are coming on chain. So I think that there's definitely a big opportunity space here of kind of new ways to kind of cross support between these different environmental assets, and also maybe making it easier for the Web3 community that's maybe less nerdy on the carbon side to really consume something that is easy to understand and spreads the impact across multiple initiatives.
Yeah, awesome. Johnny.
Mine was completely out there. It was just when you were talking about the different metadata involved in the NCTs. I'm not an NFT person, but it reminded me of NFTs and the floor price, where you'd have something like NCT as a floor priced asset. It's just anything. It's the basket that contains every single project, and then you have these different projects that have different qualities, and people might pick them out, or they might decide to merge them into the bundle, which might change the floor price of the NCT asset. I just thought that was it's kind of a bit of a parallel, maybe. I don't know whether you can take things out of NCT or add them in. I'm not entirely sure how the minting process works.
Yeah, it's basically you take take a credit that is compatible, you basically drop it in the pool, you get NCT, and at any point in time, you can now burn the NCT to get any of the credits out. So it's a bit like it's very similar how you said, like some of these, an FTX or something like that. It doesn't run like that, but basically the idea of creating unified liquidity for like non-fungible or like semi-fungible assets, which I think carbon credits fall into the semi-fungible.
Although we don't have the basket picking function currently. So currently, the NCT pool or basket on Regen that is then IBC'd over to Osmosis for the carbon liquidity. The only, once you put that NCT in, getting it back out again, you just pull, just like the standard, you just pull from the bottom of the stack. So you get the oldest out right now. We haven't yet implemented the sort of like the picking function that Toucan has. So there's some interesting work there to like open up that functionality and then build the sort of like this more modular approach to being able to bundle, rebundle, and engage. Just to note that functionality doesn't yet exist in the IBC version of NCT. One of the things just.
Oh, Gregory, I think we lost you, or like you have your hand on the mic.
Oh, so you didn't hear me?
Yeah, now you're back.
Oh, well, so sorry about that. Not sure what happened. I was just noting that the IBC version of NCT, the NCT that's live on Osmosis and Regen, does not have a basket pick function yet. So there's
oh, yeah. This part we heard. Oh, so okay. You were just I think starting into your next.
Well, yeah, the next idea, and the next idea is really just. I've been thinking, what if we just put the social price of carbon in the marketplace and allowed people to choose marketplace or social price? And if you chose the social price, then you get dropped an NFT that represents that you made that choice, and the delta between the two goes into like a funding pool that then does 50-50, 50% investment in research and development, 50% purchase of high, like more risky, but hopefully of higher quality credits, and just auto retires them on behalf. So you can sort of like, make it easy, because I think the big challenge we have is that the cognitive load, because it's all so new, is quite high for people to try to discern what the hell's going on. So to the degree to which we build some tools that make it just simpler to engage and to have fun and innovate, I think, we'll win. I'm curious, Johnny, remind me, I think Osmosis has NFTs live on Osmosis, right?
No, we don't currently. There is another chain that we're linked to, that has NFTs, and NFTs are coming eventually on Osmosis.
I thought that Osmosis started supporting NFTs. So
yes, we do have the ability to mint them. It's just that nobody has minted any projects yet.
Okay, interesting. Well, and Stargaze does for sure. Anyway, there's an opportunity for a lot of playfulness here, which for those of you in the audience, I would certainly invite. I think there's some really cool sort of like community-driven product opportunities to kind of play in this space that's open around this idea in which we sort of have a floor. We sort of have a floor asset. It's a first generation. It has its challenges, but also there's liquidity, there's utility, there's it's there, which is amazing, which is like from 0 to 1, right? And then there's all of these opportunities as these next subsequent generations of credits are coming to sort of like fuse, incentivize, rebundle, and create positive cycles. So, and I'm particularly excited. I have the idea that there's a particularly rich intersection between, you know, Toucan, Regen, Osmosis, Stargaze, you know, Evmos. There's this opportunity for very weird and wonderful interchain composability that's like at our fingertips. So it's going to be an interesting 6 months, I think.
Yeah, I just wanted, this is exactly the theory of change that we have at Toucan. Is like the you know, we have such a limited amount of time to solve climate change, and unfortunately to date, still it's pretty hard for like the smartest people to really, you know, like for everybody to work on in climate, right? The carbon market is extremely small, is still very nascent, which is why it has still so many flaws. But there are also pretty severe barriers to entry for anybody who's like, hey, I'm like, you know, I have an entrepreneurial mind and I just want to get building and I want to see how I can contribute, what I can do. And so, what we believe at Toucan is that we might not be the ones having the best idea, but like now, I think we've created the playground for so many people to go out and like test and play around and have some crazy ideas and just see if they stick. And so I'm very much on that train of like, hey, let's go out, let's experiment, let's see what the community comes up with, let's see what like people refactor these kind of on-chain carbon building blocks and like turn them into something that we might not have seen. And you know, there's been already quite a few instances and experiments that have been done with like also at the intersection of NFTs, which I do think are very interesting. And I'm kind of yeah, just curious to see what's gonna come next. And I'm, you know, if in like a few years we look back on this and like somebody just created the next version of, I don't know, something amazing that we can't currently imagine. You know, if we played a role in this, I'm going to be really happy. So that's and this is, you know, this is why it is important to give access to carbon as a building block to like every community on chain.
Awesome, love it. Johnny, do you have the stats at your fingertips? I could probably bring up the stats, but do you know what we're at in terms of liquidity and trading volume and other stuff like that?
I've got it for Osmosis in front of me. Not got it anywhere else.
For the
yeah, so
total for NCT since launch.
I've not got it since. Oh no, I do. Sorry. Yeah, so there's been $105,000 of volume of NCT. I'm not sorry. No, $150,000 of volume in NCT since launch. And there's currently around $100,000 of liquidity. Sorry, $200,000 of liquidity, which is around 100,000 NCT on the chain. So I think some people are trading it back and forth rather than, you know, buying and retiring. But yeah, definitely seeing a good amount of adoption.
Well, and I was looking at our at the beginning on Monday, we had looked at some stats because you have to look at Regen's chain for retirement stats. And I think we're sitting on Monday around 30,000 tons retired so far. And I think there's still outstanding carbon zero commitments from about 5 chains. So I think there's, you know,
oh wow,
something like 20,000 more or 25,000 more tons that are going to get retired out of that. Yeah. So
this is pretty amazing,
cool.
By the way. Yeah, this is pretty great.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? And so we now have this interchain carbon protocarbon asset, first gen protocarbon asset, cooperatively sourced, and kind of like with a crazy origin story, but that can start getting, yeah, all sorts of. I'm guessing some people are going to do some cool things on Stargaze. You know, maybe I just have this idea. I love the Bad Kids community. Maybe we'll do some weird carbon stuff with the Bad Kids community or something. Raphaël, Bad Kids is kind of like the Cosmos version of I don't know, of
CryptoPunks or something.
CryptoPunks or something. Yeah, it's much cooler than CryptoPunks.
I have no doubt about it.
Will's modeling one in the audience.
Yeah.
Well, that's a bit kid, I think. Same thing.
Yeah. No. What's Will's thing? I don't.
I think that's the bit kid. They're related.
It's like the next generation.
Yeah.
Got it. I'm so behind. Who has time? Well, I'm curious if anybody in the audience has questions. Feel free, raise your hand, and I guess maybe we just go one by one and just have a quick share of maybe a prediction, 6-month prediction and 18-month prediction. Where I'm wanting to ground it kind of in this particular in NCT, but I think we can. Obviously, we're all sort of saying this blossoms into something much bigger, but and not price predictions, but just what is happening in this world of experimentation and engagement with building on-chain carbon utility and liquidity. What's happening in 6 months, and then what's happening in another 18 months after that. So at the like 2-year mark. Rafa, you go first.
Oh wow, I hate predictions. Well, the first thing that I think will be built is an arbitrage, like some kind of a bunch of arbitrage bots, because we now have NCT on 3 different chains, and I see that there's already a price difference between them. So there's an arbitrage opportunity here, which I think is so my prediction is somebody's going to build it. What else? I think that well, I hope that we can kind of expand the utility of it beyond what's possible today, and really like the idea of what you said earlier about thinking how we can potentially bundle, create more like composite products that that spread impact across different initiatives. So I could see that. I could see that happening maybe in 6 months. Yeah. On the 18-month time frame, what I do hope to see is, similar to what Johnny said earlier, is like if we can anchor NCT as like this floor, but make this liquidity useful. So again, like how can this liquidity bootstrap like other sources of supply? How can this liquidity give access to is there a way where you can maybe deposit a credit into NCT but still reserve the right to claiming that exact credit back out, so that you don't have this dilution problem, but you can still access the liquidity of it. So I think this is something that I think is worth experimenting with. So yeah, I would say that this is this is kind of the what jumps to mind, and obviously what I hope is that within 18 months a lot of protocols will have automated the diversion of value towards regeneration. And I'm specifically not calling it offsetting, because as you said, Johnny, is it's so difficult to especially for blockchains to assess their exact carbon footprint, and it might cost you a lot of money to get to that exact number. I think this money is better spent in just driving it towards climate action directly, rather than to some intermediaries that are going to assess that carbon footprint fee. So I think having more actors divert value programmatically, right? And really lean into the programmatic and like programmable nature of on-chain assets.
Awesome. Johnny.
I think you've snapped me there at the last minute then, because I was going to say, I think within 6 months we'll see some programmatic retirement happening with contracts, in that we've already got assets moving between chains within the same transaction, you know, starting on one chain, going to another one, and then doing something on that chain and moving onto a third chain. That's already a thing now. So I think that we'll see contracts that, as part of the contract, they purchase and retire NCT. That's kind of, yeah, I'm hoping that's the case in 6 months, that it's kind of an offset on your transaction. So that's kind of like live offset, live regeneration for every transaction that you make with a protocol.
Agreed.
18 months is 18 months is, I mean, I think people have said before, 18 months is like 5 or 10 years in crypto. 18 months ago, I couldn't have pictured things that are happening today. I'm probably going to go something quite similar. I'd say something where you buy NCT and hold it, and because you're holding it, you're kind of registering an interest, and that the funds that you've used to purchase and hold it then are diverted towards a company that can innovate in the space. Again, don't know how it would happen, but that's the kind of thing that I think we could probably see in 18 months.
Oh, cool. Like liquid stake
Yeah,
carbon with
it's promised to retire.
with like a loan, perpetual loan system that then, you know, is sort of like a forward contract for some future carbon, and but also frees up liquidity now. So in 6 months, I think there seems like there's some consensus that there's going to be some significant innovation for automated and programmatic offsetting, where we have blockchains and smart contracts where you're just sort of saying, like, per transaction, we're just going to buy this amount and retire it. It's going to be automated. Maybe there's some other cool features that unlocks as well. And then, you know, 2 years from now, another 18 months after that, there's going to be some significant innovation on how to leverage this sort of, like, you know, proto carbon that is NCT, and the liquidity that's built there to be bootstrapping and funding innovation in the next generation of things in creative ways. Cool. I love it.
I like that a lot. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're just coming up to the top of the hour. Raphaël and Johnny, I'm very grateful for your time. David, thanks for hosting as always. And thanks to everybody out there in the audience for listening. It's been a really, really fun conversation.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you in a couple of weeks for the next Regenerati News Hour. Thanks a bunch to Rafa and Johnny for joining us. And congrats, everyone, on the launch.
Thank you, David. That was fun. See you soon.
Thank you.
Be well.
Ciao, ciao.